Chapter 39 of Lorna Doone. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Daisy 55. Lorna Doone by Ara D. Blackmore. Chapter 39. A Troubled State and a Foolish Joke. Stickles took me aside the next day, and opened all his business to me, whether I would or not. But I gave him clearly to understand that he was not to be vexed with me, neither to regard me as in any way dishonest, if I should use for my own purpose, or for the benefit of my friends, any part of the knowledge and privy thus enforced upon me. To this he agreed quite readily, but upon the express provision that I should do nothing to thwart his schemes, neither unfold them to any one, but otherwise be allowed to act according to my own conscience, and as consistent with the honour of a loyal gentleman. For so he was pleased to term me. Now what he said lay in no great compass, and may be summed in smaller still, especially as people know the chief part of it already. Disaffection to the king, or rather dislike to his brother James, and fear of Roman ascendancy, had existed now for several years, and of late was spreading rapidly, partly through the downright arrogance of the Troy faction, the cruelty and austerity of the Duke of York, the corruption of justice, and confiscation of ancient rights and charters, partly through jealousy of the French king and his potent voice in our affairs, and partly, or perhaps one might even say mainly, through that natural tide in all political channels, which verily moves as if it had the moon itself for its mistress. No sooner is a thing done and fixed, being set far in advance perhaps of all that was done before, like a new mole in the sea, but immediately the waters retire, lest they should undo it, and every one says how fine it is, but leaves other people to walk on it. Then after a while, the vague endless ocean, having retired and lain still without a breeze or a murmur, frets and heaves again with the impulse, or with lashes laid on it, and in one great surge advances over every rampart. And so there was at the time I speak of, a great surge in England, not rolling yet, but seething, and one which 1,000 chief justices, and 1,000,000 Jeremy Stickles, should never be able to stop or turn, by stringing up men in front of it, any more than a rope of onions can repulse a volcano. But the worst of it was that this great movement took a wrong channel at first, not only missing legitimate line, but roaring out that the back ditchway was the true and established course of it. Against this rash and random current nearly all the ancient mariners of the state were set, not to allow the brave ship to drift there, though some little boats might try it. For the present there seemed to be a pulse, with no open onset, but people on the shore expecting, each according to his wishes, and the feel of his own finger, whence the rush of wind should come which might direct the waters. Now, to reduce high figures of speech into our own little numerals, all the towns of Somersetshire, and the half towns of Devonshire, were full of pushing, eager people, ready to swallow anything, or to make others swallow it. Whether they believe the folly about the black box and all that stuff is not for me to say. Only one thing I know: they pretended to do so, and persuaded the ignorant rustics. Taunton, Bridgewater, Minehead, and Dulverton took the lead of the other towns in utterance of their discontent, and threats of what they meant to do if ever a Papist declared to climb the Protestant throne of England. On the other hand, the Troy leaders were not as yet under apprehension of an immediate outbreak, and feared to damage their own cause by premature coercion, for the struggle was not very likely to begin in earnest during the life of the present king, unless he should, as some people hoped, be so far emboldened as to make public profession of the faith which he held, if any. So the Troy policy was to watch, not indeed permitting their opponents to gather strength, and muster in armed force or with other order, but being well apprised of all their schemes and intended movements, to wait for some bold overact, and then to strike severely. And as a toy watchman, or spy, as the Whigs would call him, Jeremy Stickles was now among us, and his duty was threefold. First, and most obstinately, to see to the levying of poundage in the little haven of Linemouth, and farther up the coast, which was now becoming a place of resort for the folk whom we call smugglers, that is to say, who land their goods without regard to king's revenue as by law established. And indeed there had been no officer appointed to take toll, until one had been sent to Minehead, not so very long before. The exercise as well, which had been ordered in the time of the Long Parliament, had been little heeded by the people hereabouts. Secondly, his duty was, though only the Doones had discovered it, to watch those outlaws narrowly, and report their manners, which were scanty; doings, which were too manifold; reputation, which was execrable; and politics, whether true to the king and the pope, or otherwise. Jeremy Stickles' third business was entirely political: to learn the temper of our people, and the gentle families; to watch the movements of the trained bands, which could not always be trusted; to discover any collecting of arms, and drilling of men among us; to prevent, if need were by open force, any importation of gunpowder, of which there had been some rumour; in a word, to observe and forestall the enemy. Now in providing for this last mentioned service, the government had made a great mistake, doubtless through their anxiety to escape any public attention; for all the disposable force at their emissary's command amounted to no more than a score of musketeers, and these so divided along the coast as scarcely to suffice for the duty of sentinels. He held a commission, it is true, for the employment of the trained bands, but upon the understanding that he was not to call upon them, except as a last resort, for any political object, although he might use them against the Doones as private criminals, if found needful, and supposing that he could get them. "So you see, John," he said in conclusion, "I have more work than tools to do with it. I am heartily sorry I ever accepted such a mixed and meagre commission. at the bottom of it lies, I am well convinced.